Real YouTubists have your opinions. I forgot what came after the Wolfey. Here are some opinions I have. Hello. It's 4 in the morning. It's really not. It's actually 2 in the afternoon, but imagine I told you it was 4 in the morning. What would you think? You'd be like, wow, this guy's so dedicated or out of his mind. Anyway, so there I was. Thinking about Pokemon. A rare occurrence for me, but it happened. And I thought, okay, we're playing Series 6 right now, and there's a whole bunch of new Pokemon, and I feel like people are kind of still figuring out the metagame, and although a metagame is developing, and we are kind of seeing Pokemon that are rising above the rest in terms of usage, I think there's still a lot of room for development. It's still like a relatively... I wouldn't say it's anywhere near solved in terms of a metagame, so I figured it could be kind of interesting just to talk about some Pokemon that I think have a lot of potential in Series 6, and Pokemon that I think are currently being underrated. To be doing this, I'm going to be using Pikalytics. This is Pikalytics.com. And I'm going to be looking at Pokemon outside the top 20. So basically, I have a list of 5 here that I've made prior to this that I know I'm going to talk about. And I'll probably give a couple honorable mentions as well to things that didn't make the list, but I still think are, good and have place. So, yeah. The first thing you got to think about when you're thinking about which Pokemon are good and which Pokemon are being underrated is what's currently being used. So it's important to look at the top here. I know in my games recently I've seen a ton of Talonflame plus Urshifu. Amoonguss is very popular, obviously. Arcanine is everywhere. Primarina is pretty up there as well. Dusclops, Ferrothorn, Clefairy. Lapras has some usage as well. But these 10 Pokemon are going to dictate a lot of what is good and what is not good. So it's important to keep that in mind. Going through the list, so I said I'd look outside the top 20, so that's Comfey is number 20. So going through the rest of these, I was surprised Marowak Alola is actually this high. I was originally going to include it on the list, but the more I thought about it, it just has such a poor matchup against Urshifu that I don't think it's very difficult to use right now. It's also a Pokemon that really wants Trick Room, which is interesting, but not great, because when Amoonguss is your number 1 most used Pokemon that that can't stop Amoonguss from sporing them and outspeed it, which means they're slower in Trick Room, are typically in a rough spot. The first, almost honorable mention I want to give is Raichu. I think Raichu's in an interesting spot. I think it's a really good support Pokemon when you figure out, how to use it. It has 4 move slot syndrome because it basically wants Fake Out, Nuzzle, Volt Switch, maybe Volt Tackle or Thunderbolt, but then it wants Charm, Eerie Impulse. And unlike back in 2016 when I won Worlds with Raichu, it doesn't have a good way to do damage. Raichu had Endeavor back then because of an event, but it doesn't get Endeavor anymore. So, Raichu definitely, I think, is not in the top 5, but... I think it is underrated. The first Pokemon I want to talk about is Galarian Weezing. Galarian Weezing is number 31 on this list. You can see the standard moves here. Sludge Bomb, Protect, Strange Demon, Taunt make up almost all the usage of the moves. And often rely on some kind of fire moves as the one that isn't used. But yeah, these moves are pretty much standard. It's got decent stats, like good defense stat, not great HP, not great special attack, not great special defense, and not a great speed stat. So you might be wondering, why do I think it's underrated? Well, if you've been watching my streams, you know that I really like Galarian Weezing. I think it's a phenomenal Pokemon, specifically because of its ability. Weezing's ability, Neutralizing Gas, turns off all abilities on the field other than its own, because that would just be kind of a conundrum. But yeah, it basically turns off all abilities on the field so that your opponent can't use any of their abilities. There's a lot of strategies that rely on their abilities, and this is something that I've learned while using Weezing, is that there's a lot of strategies that if they can't access their abilities, they become a lot worse. And there's a lot of Pokemon that really suffer without their abilities, such as Azumarill, but it comes into play a lot. A lot of Pokemon make use of their abilities, whether in big ways or small. Pokemon like Colossal can't really function without its ability a lot of the time. Cobalion plus with beat up strategy doesn't work, but there's also smaller things like turning off Intimidate, turning off Frisk. Turning off Regenerator is surprisingly big. You don't really realize how much health it means when Amoonguss is able to switch out and come back in again. So I really like Weezing. I think it's incredibly underrated, and I think it's a very interesting Pokemon that, although difficult to use, really gives you a lot of control over the game. So I really like Weezing as my number 1 pick on this list. At number 2, we keep going. I don't think Goodrill's underrated. I think even though its usage isn't that high, I think Goodrill's being used quite a bit, so I'm not putting it on this list. Milotic might be overrated. I don't love Milotic right now. Volcaruna, I think, that's another one that almost made the list, but I haven't seen enough of Volcaruna to be sure if it's actually good or not. I'm kind of interested in support Volcaruna, personally, taking advantage of that, 100 base speed, and having, Rage Powder, Will-O-Wisp, maybe Struggle Bug, stuff like that. Going a little further. Okay, the next Pokemon I think is underrated is Hydreigon. So Hydreigon was a Pokemon that actually won Worlds consecutively in 2011 and 2012, and knocked me out both times. It's an interesting Pokemon because it was really good back in Generation 5, It saw some play in Generation 6. Like, it popped up here and there in 6 and maybe in 7. I don't really remember it in 7 very much. but in 6 it still like was present sometimes. It did win nationals in 2014, but with the addition of fairy typing, Hydreigon took a massive hit because it's 4 times weak to fairy type Pokemon. So yeah, it has really good stats across the board. A high base speed stat, a really high base special attack stat, good attack. Actually, third highest stat is, or second highest stat is attack, which is funny. But yeah, decent bulk. I would say pretty good bulk actually. A pretty good speed stat, or pretty good special attack stat. Overall, really good. But it's so bad against fairy type Pokemon because fairy is immune to dragon and then also resists dark. It has really good coverage moves. That's something to note. But the reason I think it's underrated is that a lot of the fairy type Pokemon took a big hit in Series 6 by being banned. Especially Pokemon like Togekiss, and although it's not a fairy type, Dragapult really kind of, I wouldn't say invalidated Hydreigon, but it certainly didn't make it easy for it. Hydreigon actually top cut the last North American regional before the events were canceled as well. I believe it used Flash Cannon, Protect, I think Dark Pulse, and I can't remember the last move of theirs was Earth Power, Draco Meteor, but yeah. I think it's actually a pretty good spot because Hydreigon is dominating, or is like dictating so much of the metagame discussion right now, or metagame space. And Hydreigon outspeeds it and will one-shot almost all Urshifu with Draco Meteor because Urshifu is really poor special defense and Hydreigon is really good special attack. Yeah, it also resists both of the crit moves from Urshifu, which is important. I really like Hydreigon. It won me my first ever event. I ran Taunt Focus Sash Hydreigon to deal with Amoonguss, actually. Kind of funny that, you know, almost 10 years later we're here again. But yeah, its 98 base speed stat was kind of it was kind of thought to be bad for a long time because a lot of the conversation around Pokemon speed tiers was based around base 100. There were a lot of really important Pokemon at base 100, like Kangaskhan and Charizard, which with their Mega Evolutions were pretty relevant. And so it was like basically, are you over 100 at 100 or under 100? And because Hydreigon was under 100, its speed was considered like not super good, and it was in a really awkward space. But in this metagame, which is relatively slow, you can see the fastest Pokemon up here is Talonflame. But other than that, Amoonguss, Arcanine, Primarina, Urshifu, Dusclops, Ferrothorn, Clefairy, Urshifu, Lapras, like it outspeeds. It's not until number 13 that we get Charizard, which can actually outspeed Hydreigon. And then further down, like Terrakion at number 22. So it's actually faster than, 18 of the top 20, or actually Comfey is base 100, I think. But yeah, you get what I'm saying. It's actually relatively fast. So being able to outspeed Urshifu, being able to outspeed Arcanine, and potentially hit it with like Earth Power or Max Quake, I think is really good. So I think Hydreigon's pretty underrated right now, and I think it could definitely do well. Delmize, honorable mention. Jolteon, honorable mention. Like, I wasn't going to include Jolteon here because you guys know how I feel about Jolteon. You probably know how I feel about Weezing as well, but I think Jolteon's phenomenal. I think it's a really good Pokemon, but I thought, like, maybe I should have more Pokemon here that people don't already know. But yeah, I think Jolteon's super underrated and very good. Kind of crazy it's as good as Hydreigon and Kingdra right now, actually. And better than some Pokemon like Azumarill and Snorlax and Conkeldurr. Delmize, really good Pokemon, honorable mention. Conkeldurr, really good Pokemon, honorable mention. Well, let me check my list, because I actually kind of forgot about this one. Yeah, okay, so I did include Ninetales Alola on here. I think Ninetales Alola is actually in a pretty good spot right now. Again, when we're talking about speed, Ninetales Alola has base 109 speed. Faster than Hydreigon, faster than a lot of the things that we were just talking about, and it can set Aurora Veil. Now, Aurora Veil is a really incredible effect. It gives you 8 turns of Light Screen, or 5 turns of Light Screen or Reflect, 8 turns if you want to run the Light Clay. And other than Brick Break and Psychic Fangs and Core Change, you're really going to have those turns for the majority of it. Obviously, Aurora Veil, although it's very strong, only works in the Hail, which is why I think Alola and Ninetales didn't see a ton of play prior to Series 6, because Tyranitar and Torkoal were very popular. However, in Series 6, there isn't that much weather. Some people want to run Jigglypuff, some people are running Ninetales, and some people are running Politoed, but it's much, much less compared to what we were used to having for the majority of Series 5 and beforehand with Tyranitar and Torkoal. So I think there's a very good chance that if you have a weather Pokemon, your opponent will not in most of your matchups. I expect you, I wouldn't expect too much weather teams to play against other weather teams because there's not that many of them in the first place. That's relevant because with Alolan Ninetales, your Hail, overriding the Hail is one of the best ways to stop Alolan Ninetales. And if they don't have a way to overwrite your Hail, at least not with an ability, you can get Aurora Veil up with just such good team support. I would say in terms of the stats, it's not bad overall. Like, the defense is really way lower than you'd want, and it's not very strong, but the special bulk and speed and HP are not horrible. Yeah, and I think that, Aurora Veil is just a very, very, very good effect. One of the best, support moves in the game. Yeah, and Ninetales has some other things it can do. You can use Icy Wind, you can use Fake Tears. Freeze Dry is a really great attack, even though it's not super strong, especially off of Ninetales, but it's still good to have. Yeah, but overall, I think Ninetales is actually in a pretty nice spot right now, and I think it could definitely do well. Next up, our penultimate one. Wait, who's our last one? Did I miss one? Oh yeah, it's not even on here. Yeah, I don't even find it, but I know what I want to talk about. So this penultimate one, Dragargle. Dragargle I have hated for a long time. I thought it was an absolute garbage Pokemon. I thought it was like really a waste of space, and this is the first time where my opinion has changed. I think Dragargle is actually pretty strong. With Dynamax, like it compensates for the low base HP and like moderate like base defense. And it has such incredible base special defense and a pretty good special attack stat that, coupled with the debility, adaptability, makes it actually really difficult to deal with. I've seen this on two kinds of teams. I've seen it Life Orb, like a Life Orb user, and I've also seen it as a weakness policy user. People like to run weakness policy with Bulldoze Dusclops because Dragargle is really slow. It's only base 44, great in Trick Room, and the other thing about it is that it boosted special attack when it max oozes, and adaptability also gives it a power boost on Poison and Dragon type moves. So although Max Ooze isn't the strongest move, +1 Max Dragon is extremely scary. And it actually has good coverage moves as well. And Thunderbolt, Poison, Dragon, and Electric are pretty good coverage across the board. Yeah. Draco Meteor also has a secondary benefit of lowering the opponent's attack stats, which compensates for Dragargle's low base defense stat. Or like, its defense isn't bad, but coupled with the HP, it always feels frailer on the physical side. So, yeah. The thing is that there aren't that many good Poison Max Pokemon. Like, it's kind of hard to max a Poison type. Maxing Fighting types is a bit easier, but maxing Poison types can be difficult. And the effective rate of a max Poison move is actually pretty strong, raising your special attack. So you need to be a Poison type and a special attacker, and be able to compensate like for the lack of power the first time you ooze, and for the general lack of power in your Poison type attacks, because Poison and Fighting attacks don't get much stronger when you Dynamax, unlike every other type. So. Yeah, I think Dragargle is actually pretty strong. I've also seen this paired with Speed Swap. I've lost to that at least once, maybe twice. Yeah, it's a very scary Pokemon, I think, and I think it's certainly underplayed right now. Like, I don't know if I've beaten these. I think I have like a 25% win rate against these things, and sure, it might be the teams I'm using, but also I think it's just like a Pokemon that's in a really good space right now. It also resists fighting, which is nice, and although it doesn't resist Dark Urshifu, it resists Water Urshifu. Yeah, I can Max Lightning for Amoonguss. It hits Primarina for way super effective damage, and it's a Dragon type that's not weak to Fairy, which is rare. So yeah, I think it's actually a pretty strong Pokemon overall. And last but not least, I didn't find it on this list. Oh, there it is. Okay, last but not least, Alchemy. So Alchemy is a Pokemon that I think is very interesting. I thought Alchemy would look incredibly strong before the games came out. It was a little lackluster. It was basically used on one team and not other than that. However, I think it should be pretty strong right now. So one of the weaknesses of Alchemy is that you couldn't Choice Scarf it because it wasn't fast enough to outspeed Dragapult. And if you ran Focus Sash, they could double into it because it was not super bulky. Can't take a ton of double ups. It's bulky, but not that bulky. And also the main thing is Togekiss. So Togekiss was on nearly every team, and one of the best things about Alchemy, the main reason to use it, is this Decorate attack, which raises your target 2 stages of attack and 2 stages of special attack. Now, that's a great effect, and it actually even works through Protect, which is very powerful. However, it doesn't work if the opponent redirects you. You would end up boosting them instead, and so I think I put Alchemy in a pretty rough spot. Now, Amoonguss was removed from Togekiss was removed from the game, or was removed from the format, I should say. And so Alchemy is now legal again and able to be used. And so I think that this is a Pokemon that people haven't been using just because it wasn't good in Series 5. And it wasn't really good at any point in the format because Togekiss was around for most of it. And it did top 8 at Regional when Fevzi used it to power up his Lapras, but it didn't see much play beyond that, I think. So I think this Pokemon should be in a really nice spot right now. Fairy typing is pretty good, especially as people run more Pokemon that are weak to fairies because Togekiss is gone, such as Urshifu. Urshifu can't really function very well in a Togekiss metagame, in my opinion, although I think it did when the players kept in the Togekiss metagame, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, there's way less redirection. The Pokemon in general are slower, I would say. You can see there's a lot more slow, bulky Pokemon in the top 10, like Amoonguss, Amoonguss, Dusclops, Ferrothorn, Clefairy, and Primarina are all slower than Alchemy, so yeah, you can see there's a lot, in general, things just look slower, at least to me. Lapras, Grimmsnarl, Dracozolt, Gastrodon, Duraludon's kind of fast, Porygon-Z is fast, but yeah, you get what I'm saying. So, I think Alchemy is really interesting. I don't think it's in an awful spot at all. It has a bunch of different sets that it can use, and I think it's not really explored very much right now at all. So, that's a Pokemon that I think could be pretty strong. And yeah, that's my top 5. So those are just 5 Pokemon going through. Again, there's plenty of Pokemon that I think are underplayed. I think Noivern's pretty good. I think Persian Alola is pretty good. I think that there's a lot of room for experimentation right now. I don't think the meta has to be as kind of settled as it might appear. But yeah, those are ones that I personally have my eyes on and that I think could be good. So I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you did. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe and comment about your subscription. And also don't forget to drink water. Goodbye.